The intro music gets me every time. Hi again, everybody. Welcome once again to the 17th Annual Newburyport Documentary Film Festival. I am Program Director James Sullivan, and we are conducting interviews with the directors of the feature films that we will be showcasing in our festival upcoming in just a couple of weeks now, beginning September 17th. Today, we're going to be talking about a film called The Merrimack, River at Risk. And this is an environmentally based film about our own Merrimack River. So rather than sort of try to describe it, I'm just going to say, let's go ahead and watch the trailer for the film, and then I'll introduce the director of the film. So let's take a look at the trailer.
Along the highways and under the bridges, behind the malls, past the factories, flows a vital resource, a source of life, an important piece of New England's past, present, and future. Forgotten and ignored by many is a river that seems familiar, yet is often overlooked, waiting to be rediscovered. A river at great risk.
So what does the Merrimack River mean to you?
It smells all the time.
I'm Leah Hart, and I'm going to lead you on a journey through New England's backyard. We'll discover a river that powered the Industrial Revolution and some of New England's biggest cities. While our cities thrived, the rivers suffered.
So today, I'm going to tell you, this is a beautiful river, all right? When I actually was born and bred here in Lowell, and you didn't come down to the river, all right? The river was in a horrible state.
Do you remember as a kid
there was dead fish, there was, it was polluted, there was actually, raw sewage coming through the system. You did not go on the river. If you fell in, you'd probably go to the hospital and get a tetanus shot.
Did you know that actually, even though this river seems like really nice to swim in and pretty clear, it's one of the most endangered rivers in the United States?
Endangered.
Can we save it? The Merrimack.
Please welcome the director of The Merrimack, Jerry Monkman. Jerry, thanks for being here.
Hi, James. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for asking me to come on.
Let's just begin by saying that I'm going to bet that you guys came across this a lot in the making of the film, but we all in this area. I live in Amesbury. Everybody in Newburyport, where the film festival is based. We all cross the Merrimack, come in contact with the Merrimack constantly, right? And I would guess that very few of us actually realize that it is still considered an endangered river. I would guess that most people would say, sure, it's been cleaned up, right? It's been, the Clean Water Act, the river's in much better shape than it was decades ago, which is true. But is it true that most local residents around the river do not know necessarily that it is still considered to be endangered?
Oh, yeah, I think that was one of our main reasons for doing this film. The Society for Protection of New Hampshire Forests, which produced this film, came to me with the idea in 2017 after it had been listed by American Rivers as one of the 10 most endangered in the country. And we were thinking, I bet there's hundreds of thousands of people, like you said, who drive over this river every day, who either don't even think about the river at all and don't even realize how important it is in our daily lives, or don't realize that there are threats facing it continuously. And the main threat, the reason it was listed, was the U.S. Forest Service realized that the Merrimack was probably the #1 river in the country at risk for losing the forested part of its watershed. It's going to lose the most forested acres out of any river in the country. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like you said, to me, what was interesting about this story is, it was cleaned up 120 years ago, and we could talk about that if you want, and then it was cleaned up again 50 years ago with the Clean Water Act, and now it's at risk from a couple different kinds of pollution that really threaten it for the near and long-term future.
So you mentioned the Forest Society, New Hampshire Forest Society. Can you tell me about the arrangement that was made that brought you in to direct this film?
Sure. It was basically the president of the Forest Society, Jack Savage. Film was his idea. We had worked together on other projects, and he offered to produce it and help find the funding for it, and pretty much let me direct it. I did work on the story with him, but our goal was to sort of raise awareness about these problems in the watershed and try to find ways to enlighten people who live here. There's almost 600,000 people in the watershed who drink water from this watershed every day, and the Forest Society works with about 30 conservation partners to protect land, protect water quality, and the hope was that by doing this film we would raise awareness and help all those organizations do their job and protect the river.
You live in Portsmouth, am I right?
Correct.
And you do very specifically environmentally oriented films, right? That's what you work on.
Right. Yeah. I've been a conservation photographer and filmmaker for 25 plus years. Right.
What can you tell us about what you maybe didn't know about the Merrimack or about major rivers like the Merrimack in terms of where they stand today? I'm sure you learned some things that you didn't necessarily know, even though you are always working outdoors, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the Merrimack, yeah, I guess for me, it always seemed like just one of those really old industrial rivers that had been polluted, but like you had said, cleaned up. I wasn't aware of the fact that it was the most endangered river as far as forest loss. There's close to 500,000 acres of forest are predicted to be lost in this watershed over the next 30 years. And that's mostly in the I-93 corridor in northern Mass and southern New Hampshire. But despite all the big cities in the river, it's still 80% undeveloped and unforested. So there's a lot of potential here. I think the thing that surprised me most, though, was the amount of sewage that is still dumped into the Merrimack River. And it's because of our old sewage treatment plants in the big cities, Lowell, Manchester, Lawrence, Haverhill. And a summer like this, where we have these huge downpours like we've had all of July and into August. This year, I don't know the numbers yet, but it's probably going to be close to sort of the annual record for how much sewage is dumped into the river each year, which is more than 750 million gallons of raw sewage. So that's like dumping an oil drum full of poop into your swimming pool in the backyard, and I don't think anyone would want to swim in that after that. And I didn't realize that this was really going on still to that level. So I mean, a lot of people down in your part of the watershed, I think, were aware of it and working on it, but up here in New Hampshire, I hadn't been aware of that problem to that extent.
Yeah, well, thanks for the visual.
Yeah, let's all go swimming this afternoon.
Yikes. Okay. So the film, sort of is hosted, we're taking on this journey through all the various aspects of the river, its uses, the attempts to clean it, some surprising things about how much it's used for recreation, which a lot of people don't necessarily think of. And all of that, we're hosted by Leah Hart, right? So she's your on-camera host of the film, essentially, right? She interviews everyone who you talked to. You want to tell me a little bit about Leah, or how she came to be involved with the project?
Sure. Leah's a young conservationist from Wolfboro, New Hampshire originally. So that's actually part of the upper Merrimack watershed. And she was working at the Forest Society when we started filming this as a land steward. So her job was to go out on Forest Society properties and just make sure everything was copacetic out there. And we thought it'd be really interesting to have a young woman who grew up in the watershed, is working in the watershed, to sort of explore it with us and be our voice, asking the questions, and to have her learn along the way like we did. And I have to say, she did an amazing job on this. She had never had any on-camera experience before this film. In the middle of filming, she actually left the Forest Society to go work for another conservation organization. And we thought of maybe trying to find a different person to do it, because the Forest Society thought it'd be great to have someone still working there in this film, but we couldn't find anyone who really was as great as she was on camera. So she did a wonderful job. She's actually back working for the Forest Society now on Merrimack River issues. So it's kind of come full circle for her. And I just loved, when you watch this film, you'll see her ask a lot of pretty intelligent questions. And she did all the research ahead of time with our interview, before meeting our interviewees. And there was very little directing from my part. There was obviously some, but she knew the issues, and she asked the right questions to get us the story we needed to get.
So besides being in good hands with Leah, one of the things that attracted us to your film is that we feel like we're in good hands visually with your directing and choice of, photography. And there's a lot of gorgeous footage. There's a lot of footage that sort of makes you reconsider the Merrimack, when we do sort of, a lot of our main interaction with it locally is crossing it on bridges, right? And not really thinking about it. And, there's a lot of gorgeous footage in the film. One thing that we've talked about often over the last several years, submissions coming into the film festival, regardless of what type of film it is, and usually they're not about environmental issues at all. There's tons of drone footage. Everybody wants to show off their drone capabilities. And, we've been laughing about how absurd the level of drone footage has gotten in documentary filmmaking. But in this case, it's totally called for, obviously, right? Like amazing footage of, wide open spaces and a huge, massive river. And how many miles is the Merrimack? I mean, it's a couple hundred miles or something, right?
It's about 120 miles from where it's started to be called the Merrimack River in Franklin, New Hampshire. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So anyway, all of that is just to say, the footage is really beautiful, and in a lot of ways surprising even for people who live right on the Merrimack, I think. And so, do you want to just talk about your own approach to, taking footage of the outdoor world, of the natural world that we live in here in New England?
And first, thanks for all the compliments there. I appreciate it. I started out as almost a pure landscape photographer almost 30 years ago. That was my passion for getting into using visual imagery for communication. So that's still a pretty ingrained part of my visual sense when I go out and do filmmaking now, which is relatively new for me. So I'm always looking for that sort of classic light for landscape photography. I feel like any shortcomings I have as a director, I can at least make the films look beautiful, because that's where I come from, and I try really hard to do that. But I do see I see the world in that way. I think the Merrimack River is a beautiful place. I think our historic cities are really beautiful. The architecture is beautiful.
Yeah.
So I wanted that to come across in the film. And the drones, I've only done one other feature-length documentary, which was on the Northern Pass issue here in New Hampshire, and that was about 8 years ago. We did filming on that, and I think of that as my time-lapse film, because that was when sort of the moving time-lapse videography was kind of the new thing that everyone was doing. And I'm thinking of this as my drone film. And I was definitely not excited about becoming a drone photographer at first. I found them kind of annoying out there if I find them in the wild. But they've become such an important part of conservation work, and
sure,
especially in a sort of flat forested landscape or flat cities. It's hard to get that sometimes that big landscape perspective from the ground, and the drone makes that so easy to do. And it's so affordable. If you look at this footage in this film and think about trying to recreate that 20 years ago,
you'd have to hire a helicopter, right?
Our budget would have been, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars just for the aerial footage. And this was, a $2,000 drone that, we just flew up whenever we were in a place where we were allowed to do it. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, I just think that perspective is really important to tell the story of what the Merrimack River is and where it is and how it is associated with all of our lives here.
Right. No question. Yeah. So for those of you watching this video, this interview, you may think you know something about the Merrimack. That you're going to learn plenty by watching this film. So Jerry, thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to speaking with you again during the festival in a few weeks. But in the meantime, thanks again. We would love to take a moment to thank our sponsors as well. And we will see you at the next interview. Thanks again, Jerry.
All right. Thank you, James. I appreciate you sharing our story.